Was it murder through text? The unbelievable story of Michelle Carter. When words become weapons, can words kill? It sounds absurd. But what if someone told you that a simple text message could push someone to their death? That the encouragement to die, sent through a screen, could lead to a prison sentence? This isn't fiction. It's the chilling real-life case of Michelle Carter, a young woman whose digital words became the center of a legal, moral, and psychological firestorm. What started as a tragic teenage suicide ended in a courtroom with headlines reading, "Texting Suicide Case." But was Michelle Carter truly a manipulative villain who goaded her boyfriend to die? Or was she a vulnerable teenager caught in a psychological spiral of her own? This story forces us to ask tough questions about guilt, about influence, about whether digital communication holds the same weight as real-world actions. In this video, we unravel the shocking events, the legal twists, and the emotional turmoil behind one of the most controversial trials in modern history. Let's go deep into the unbelievable story of Michelle Carter and the case that blurred the line between virtual words and real-life consequences. The relationship that started it all. Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy III were two teenagers living in Massachusetts. They met in 2012 while on vacation in Florida. What followed was an on and off relationship that, despite limited in-person interaction, grew emotionally intense through text messages, Facebook, and phone calls. Michelle was dealing with her own emotional struggles, including depression and an eating disorder. Conrad, too, suffered from anxiety and deep-rooted depression. He had previously attempted suicide and struggled with self-worth. Their relationship wasn't traditional. They lived an hour apart and rarely saw each other face-to-face. Yet their communication, primarily over text, became their emotional lifeline. But that lifeline slowly became a trap, a dangerous shift in tone. As time passed, Conrad's mental health deteriorated. He often expressed his desire to end his life. Instead of encouraging him to seek help, Michelle began texting him messages like, "You just need to do it, Conrad. You keep pushing it off and you say you'll do it, but you never do. You can't think about it. You just have to do it." Some texts were chillingly cold. Michelle even appeared frustrated with Conrad's hesitation. In one message, she told him, "The time is right and you're ready. You just need to do it." She repeatedly suggested ways he could kill himself, including carbon monoxide poisoning through a water pump in his truck. These weren't just one-off messages, it was a pattern that prosecutors would later argue was calculated and manipulative. The final day. On July 13, 2014, Conrad Roy was found dead in his truck in a parking lot behind a Kmart. Cause of death: carbon monoxide poisoning. Next to him, police discovered a suicide note in his phone. Investigators recovered thousands of text messages between Michelle and Conrad, but one stood out. During his final moments, Conrad reportedly exited the vehicle, overcome with fear. He told Michelle he was scared. Instead of calling for help or trying to stop him, Michelle told him to get back in the truck. That message and that one chilling push would become the center of a groundbreaking legal case, the trial that shook the nation. In February 2015, Michelle Carter was indicted for involuntary manslaughter. The prosecution argued that Michelle's words directly caused Conrad's death. They claimed she had a duty to intervene and failed to do so. Michelle's defense painted a different picture. They argued that she, too, was mentally unwell, that her medications, including antidepressants like Celexa, affected her judgment, that Conrad was determined to die, and Michelle was simply caught up in his plan. The trial wasn't held before a jury. Michelle waived that right, and it was decided by a judge. The prosecution played text after text. They painted Michelle as someone who wanted to gain sympathy by being the grieving girlfriend. They pointed to messages she sent friends after Conrad's death, in which she said things like, "His death is my fault, like honestly I could have stopped him. I was talking to him on the phone when he killed himself. I heard him die." They argued that Michelle knew what she was doing and wanted the attention that came with being the tragic girlfriend. The defense countered with mental health experts. They said Michelle suffered from involuntary intoxication, her brain chemistry altered by medication, that she wasn't in control of her actions. But the judge focused on one key fact: Michelle's instruction to Conrad to get back in the truck. That, he believed, showed a clear failure to act and direct encouragement of suicide. Guilty. In June 2017, Michelle Carter was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The judge ruled that her actions, or more specifically, her failure to act during a critical moment, constituted wanton and reckless behavior under the law. Carter had not physically harmed Conrad, but the court emphasized that her persistent encouragement and her chilling command to re-enter the carbon-filled truck were morally and legally indefensible. The judgment became a landmark decision, one that argued a person's words, when delivered with intent and consequence, can be as damaging as any physical act. It opened the door for examining how digital communication carries moral accountability. In 2018, she was sentenced to 15 months in prison. She began serving her sentence in early 2019 and was released after 11 months for good behavior. The public was sharply divided. Some believed the sentence was far too light, while others believed she should never have been charged. But beyond the debate, one fact remained clear. Conrad Roy was gone, and Michelle Carter's words played a direct role in his death. Legal and ethical aftermath. Michelle Carter's case set a controversial precedent that has since been studied in law schools, courtrooms, and think tanks. The ruling didn't establish new legislation, but it tested the limits of First Amendment protections in the digital age. Could encouragement to die, even if typed on a phone, be criminal? The judge said yes, and the implications were profound. Legal scholars argued over the case's reach. Could this allow prosecutors to charge people for messages that push someone emotionally, even without direct intent to harm? Others worried it might criminalize poorly worded or emotionally charged conversations between vulnerable people. The ruling wasn't just about Michelle and Conrad anymore. It became a symbol of how digital speech is evolving. As communication continues to shift online, the question remains, when do words cross the line from expression to execution? Media, documentaries, and public response. The media exploded with coverage of the case. HBO released the documentary, I Love You Now Die, which examined both sides of the trial. Hulu dramatized it further in their series, The Girl from Plainville. These portrayals reignited public discourse. Some viewers sympathized with Michelle, seeing a deeply troubled girl trapped in a dysfunctional relationship. Others were disturbed by her lack of empathy and her obsession with how she would be perceived after Conrad's death. The internet was divided, but the tragedy remained. A young man lost his life, another lost her future, and millions were left questioning the power and danger of digital influence, mental health, responsibility, and digital ethics. Michelle Carter's story is more than a crime tale. It's a case study in the intersection of mental health and digital responsibility. Conrad Roy's pain was real. He needed help, but instead of guiding him to support, Michelle echoed his dark thoughts. The line between empathy and encouragement was blurred. For mental health professionals, the case raised serious concerns. How should we treat vulnerable teenagers who enable each other's self-harm? Are they criminals or casualties of untreated illness? And as digital communication becomes the norm, how do we hold people accountable for words sent through screens? This isn't just about one tragic case. It's about the world we now live in, one where messages are instant, influence is silent, and consequences can be fatal. A story that demands reflection. The case of Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. It challenges the limits of responsibility and the power of influence. It reminds us that what we say, even through a screen, matters. Words can comfort, encourage, inspire, but they can also manipulate, push, and destroy. Michelle Carter didn't pull a trigger or poison a drink, but she typed words, sent messages, delivered pressure, and a young man died. What happened between them was tragic, complex, and layered in pain. But it's a reminder to all of us, behind every message is a real human being, and behind every screen, there's a life that might be hanging by a thread. If this story moved you, made you think, or sparked a debate in your mind, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that challenge the way we think. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we wish weren't true.